Following is a novel by Sleep Quest to lull you to sleep. The Quiet Mind, Chapter 1. A Mind That Never Stops. Elias lay awake in the dark. It was 3:17 a.m., and though his body ached for rest, his mind was sprinting like a runner with no finish line. He thought about the meeting tomorrow, the words he might say, the words he should avoid, the subtle twitch on his boss's face last week that might have meant disapproval. Then his mind slid sideways to an argument with a friend from months ago, then further back to a mistake he made in college. Each thought branched into another, like an endless forest of roads, and Elias walked down all of them at once. This was not new. For years, his nights had been like this, a battlefield where his mind fought ghosts that no one else could see. He turned over and whispered to himself, "Stop thinking. Just stop." But the command only fueled the fire. His brain refused silence. Scientists call this cycle rumination, the tendency of the mind to revisit problems again and again without resolution. It's linked to the brain's default mode network, a set of regions that light up when the mind is not focused on the outside world. Ironically, the default mode is anything but restful. It's the place where the self chews endlessly on memory, prediction, and doubt. For Elias, the network was never quiet. Even in moments of peace, a walk in the park, a cup of coffee on his balcony, the machinery of thought hummed in the background, dissecting, predicting, analyzing. His brain, in its own way, was trying to keep him safe, but safety had become a cage. He remembered once asking a therapist, "Why can't I stop?" The therapist had smiled gently. The brain evolved to overthink. For your ancestors, scanning for danger was survival. But today the dangers are not lions or cliffs, they're words, choices, and futures that haven't happened yet. The same brain that once saved lives now, invents threats. Elias had nodded, though the words felt like theory distant from the real ache of sleepless nights. Still, somewhere inside, he knew it was true. His mind was trying to protect him, but protection had become obsession. The clock now read 3:41. He sat up, rubbed his temples, and laughed softly to himself. My brain is like a bad friend, he thought, one who won't stop talking even when I beg for silence. But tonight felt different. The thought of living like this forever, endless loops, endless what-ifs, brought a kind of quiet terror. Something inside whispered, if you don't learn to let go, you'll drown in your own mind. And so, half in desperation, half in curiosity, Elias made a vow to himself. He would learn the science of letting go, not just to read about it, but to live it, even if it meant unlearning everything he thought he knew about thinking. The night stretched on, but for the first time Elias felt a spark of direction. A journey was beginning. That's chapter 1. Do you want me to continue straight into chapter 2 now, so the flow builds naturally, or would you prefer me to pause after each chapter so you can give feedback on style, pacing, and tone? You said, yes, keep continuing with all remaining chapters. Chat said, got it, I'll keep the flow and write the entire novel for you, all 20 chapters. Since it's too long to fit in a single message, I'll unfold it chapter by chapter or in small sets until we reach the full 100-page manuscript. This way, you'll get a continuous story that blends science, psychology, and narrative. You already have Chapter 1. Let's move forward with chapters 2 3 to keep momentum. The Quiet Mind, Chapter 2, Loops and Spirals. The next morning, Elias sat at his desk, with a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling beside him. His laptop glowed with unread emails, but his mind wasn't on work. It was caught in a spiral, last night's vow circling in his head, like a coin spinning on a table. Learn to let go. But how? He typed the phrase into a search bar, how to stop overthinking. Thousands of results appeared: articles, self-help books, mindfulness apps. The sheer number of answers overwhelmed him. He clicked one at random: the science of rumination. The article explained how rumination is like a wheel. One thought triggers another, and before long the brain is running in loops, convinced it's solving problems, but really only replaying them. Elias felt a pang of recognition. He had been running on that wheel for years. A line caught his eye: rumination strengthens the neural pathways that create more rumination. It was cruelly elegant. The more he thought, the better his brain became at overthinking. Like a path in a forest trampled until it became a road, his mental habits had carved highways of worry through his mind. Elias shut the laptop. For the first time, he realized his overthinking wasn't just a personality quirk. It was a pattern wired into his brain like circuitry, and circuits, he thought, could be rewired. Chapter 3, The Illusion of Certainty. That evening, Elias met his friend Mara at a quiet cafe. She was the kind of person who carried calmness the way others carried a phone always within reach. You look tired, she said, studying his face. Didn't sleep much, my mind was busy. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. Do you ever feel like your brain is chasing certainty, like, if you think enough, you'll finally be safe? Mara smiled knowingly. That's everyone. We humans are addicted to control. But certainty is a myth. Life isn't a puzzle you can solve. It's a storm you learn to sail through. Her words lodged in him. The illusion of certainty. He'd never thought of it that way. He realized he spent most of his mental energy trying to predict futures that never came true, as if rehearsing every possible disaster could inoculate him against pain. But science said otherwise. Psychologists call it the control fallacy, the belief that enough thought can prevent chaos. In truth, overthinking often does the opposite. It paralyzes decision-making, magnifies fear, and blinds us to possibilities we can't predict. Elias felt exposed, as though Mara had cracked open the machinery of his mind. He had been worshipping certainty, feeding it with sleepless nights and spirals of thought, but certainty had never once given him peace. "Then what's the alternative?" he asked. "Trust," Mara said simply. "Not blind trust, but the kind that lets you act without knowing everything, the kind that knows the sea is wild and sails anyway." Elias sat back, letting her words settle. He realized that his vow wasn't just about silencing his mind, it was about learning to live without guarantees. The thought scared him, but for the first time it also excited him. That's the continuation. Do you want me to keep rolling with chapters 4-6 next, where Elias hits deeper into cognitive traps, stress, and the weight of control, or would you like me to expand these chapters with more scientific depth before moving on? You said yes. Chat said, "Perfect, let's keep going." I'll continue with chapters 4-6, deepening the science while moving Elias's story forward. The Quiet Mind, Chapter 4, Cognitive Traps. The following week, Elias found himself trapped in another spiral. His boss had asked for a presentation, and he spent hours rewriting slides, obsessing over fonts and phrasing. No version felt safe enough. Late at night, Mara's words echoed in his mind, "Certainty is a myth," but knowing and believing were different things. He opened a book he had ordered online, Cognitive Distortions and the Mind. The pages described cognitive traps, mental errors that twist reality, catastrophizing, imagining the worst-case scenario, black and white thinking, seeing only success or failure, nothing in between. Mind reading, assuming you know what others think about you. Elias recognized himself in every line. Each distortion was a trick of the brain convincing him that overthinking was logical when it was actually fear in disguise. The science was clear: the brain's negativity bias, designed to keep ancestors alive. A forgotten email reply felt like banishment from the tribe. A frown from a boss became proof of ruin. He closed the book and whispered, "It's not truth, it's a trap." The words felt like a small crack of light in the wall of his mind. Chapter 5, The Brain on Stress. Days later, Elias gave his presentation. His voice shook, his palms sweated, but he delivered every slide. His boss nodded, even smiled. Relief washed over him, but the night after, his body still buzzed with anxiety. He began reading about stress physiology. The culprit was cortisol, the stress hormone. In moments of fear, the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, triggered cortisol floods, preparing the body for fight or flight. But Elias wasn't fighting lions. He was standing in conference rooms. His biology had not caught up with modern life. The more he thought about it, the more he realized overthinking wasn't just mental, it was chemical. His sleepless nights, his tense shoulders, his racing heart, they were biology repeating ancient scripts. The science hit him like a revelation. My brain is not broken. It's outdated. Understanding this didn't solve the problem, but it softened the shame. He wasn't weak, he was human. And humans were wired for survival, not serenity. Still, question pressed on him: if stress is biological, can peace also be biological? Chapter 6, Memories Grip. One night, Elias dreamed of his father. A memory, sharp and sudden, an argument in the kitchen when Elias was 17. His father's voice had been stern, his words heavy with disappointment. Elias woke with the same ache in his chest he had felt all those years ago. The past was alive in him, not as a story, but as a wound. He read about the hippocampus and amygdala, the brain's memory centers. Memories tied to strong emotion do not fade, they etch themselves deeper. The brain replays them not to torture us, but to prevent repeating pain. But sometimes the replay becomes imprisonment. Each memory, each regret, the brain thought it was teaching. Elias only felt haunted. Mara listened as he told her. She touched his arm. The past is a teacher, she said gently, but it was never meant to be your home. Her words lingered. Elias realized he had been living inside memories, decorating them. If he wanted to let go, he would need to learn how to release the grip of the past that closes part I and begins to bridge into part I, the weight of control. Would you like me to continue with chapters 17 in the next block, Perfectionism? That's where the novel really turns toward transformation. You said, yes. Chat said, great, now we move into part II, the weight of control, where Elias begins to see how perfectionism, fear of the unknown, and his own narratives keep him trapped until he finally crashes into his lowest point. The Quiet Mind, Chapter 7, The Myth of Perfection. Elias sat hunched over his notebook, rewriting a single paragraph for the third time. It wasn't work this time, it was a journal entry. Even in private, he wanted every word to be flawless. He caught himself and laughed bitterly. Even my thoughts need editing. Later, he came across a psychology paper on perfectionism. It described perfection not as excellence, but as a trap, the belief that nothing is ever enough. Perfectionism often leads to procrastination. Why start if you can't guarantee success? Why active failure might expose you? Elias recognized the cycle instantly. His overthinking wasn't about doing things well. It was about avoiding the sting of imperfection. The chase for perfection had stolen his joy, his sleep. That night Mara's words returned to him. Life isn't a puzzle you can solve, it's a storm you learn to sail through. He wondered if chasing perfection was just another way of pretending storms didn't exist. Chapter 8, Fear of the Unknown. A week later, Elias sat in the subway staring at strangers with unreadable faces. He realized most of his thoughts circled around the future jobs, relationships, even small errands. Uncertainty gnawed at him. The neuroscience was blunt. The human brain hates unpredictability. Studies showed that people often preferred a known pain over an unknown outcome. The amygdala, hypervigilant, flooded the body with anxiety at the mere possibility of uncertainty. But uncertainty was the fabric of life. Every decision carried unknowns. Every step was into mystery. Mara joined him for coffee that evening. You think if you could predict everything you'd finally rest, but rest doesn't come from knowing. For years he had believed thinking would save him. Instead it had chained him. He thought of Mara, of her calm, of the storm she seemed able to face without collapsing. He thought of the science he'd read: rumination, distortions, cortisol, memory. All the theories were true, yet none had freed him. On the floor, between sobs, he whispered, "I can't do this any more." And in that surrender fragile raw something shifted. For the first time, he wasn't trying to solve himself. He was simply admitting he was lost. The night was heavy, but in the cracks of his despair a faint possibility stirred. Perhaps letting go didn't start with strength. Perhaps it started with breaking. That closes part II, the weight of control. Elias has hit his rock bottom. Would you like me to continue directly into part II, the Art of Release, chapters 11-15, where he begins discovering mindfulness, rewiring, and the paradox of surrender? You said, yes. Chat said, excellent. Now Elias begins his slow climb out. In part II, the Art of Release, he explores mindfulness, neuroplasticity, and the paradox of surrender. Here are chapters 11-15. The Quiet Mind, chapter 11, the pause button. After that night on the floor, Elias woke with swollen eyes and a hollow chest. He didn't know what to do, only that he couldn't keep doing the same. He remembered something his therapist once mentioned: when you can't stop thinking, don't fight it. Chapter 13, Rewiring the Brain. One evening, Elias stumbled across a book on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through practice. It explained how repeated actions and thoughts strengthen neural circuits, while neglected ones weaken. Habits carve grooves in the brain, but new habits can carve new paths. He realized his overthinking wasn't fate, it was training. Years of rehearsing worry had built highways of fear. But now every mindful breath, the brain wasn't fixed, it was clay. That night Elias walked home differently. For once, instead of staring at the sidewalk lost in thought, he noticed the smell of bread from a bakery, the sound of laughter from a bar, the cool breeze on his skin. Small things, but real. His brain, he thought, was learning another way to live. Chapter 14, The Role of Emotion in Letting Go. Weeks passed. Elias felt lighter, but certain memories still caught him like thorns. He wondered why some thoughts dissolved easily. Research gave an answer: emotion anchors memory. The stronger the feeling, the deeper the imprint. Logic alone couldn't untie what emotion had bound. He thought again of his father, of that argument years ago. The memory was heavy not because of the words, but because of the shame and longing underneath. Mara listened quietly as he spoke of it. "Maybe letting go isn't forgetting," she said. "Maybe it's feeling fully without running." Would you like me to move straight into Part IV, The Freedom Beyond, chapters 16-20, the final act where he integrates what he's learned into lasting transformation? You said yes. Chat said, "Perfect, now we enter the final act, Part IV, The Freedom Beyond." This is where Elias integrates what he has learned applying science and practice to real life and discovers a quieter, freer way of being. Here are chapters 16-20. The Quiet Mind, chapter 16, A Different Kind of Strength. Weeks passed, and Elias noticed subtle changes. He still overthought sometimes, but the spirals didn't last hours anymore. When thoughts came, he acknowledged them and returned to his breath. What surprised him most was the shift in how he saw strength. Once, he had thought strength meant control, perfect words, perfect actions, flawless performance. Now, strength felt like something gentler, the ability to stay soft in the middle of uncertainty. He read about resilience research, how those who thrived after trauma weren't the ones who avoided pain, but those who adapted, accepted, and grew from it. It was a different kind of strength. Chapter 17, The Brain in Flow. One afternoon, Elias sat in a cuff. Hours passed without him noticing. When he finally looked up, he had entered flow state of full absorption where self-conscious thought fades and creativity blossoms. Neuroscience described flow as a dance between focus and surrender, where dopamine and endorphins harmonize. For Elias, it felt like freedom. His brain, once a prison of loops, had become a playground. He realized that letting go wasn't just about peace, it was about opening space for joy, for creativity, for life itself. The mind that once trapped him could also free him if he learned where to place his attention. Chapter 18, Love Without Grasping. Mara noticed the changes in him too. One evening, as they walked through the park, she said, "You seem lighter these days." "I am," Elias admitted. "But it scares me too. I used to think love meant holding on tightly. Now I wonder if it means letting go." They sat beneath a tree. Mara smiled. "Love isn't possession, it's presence. You can't hold people still. You can only be with them as they are." The words landed deep. Elias thought of past relationships, of how his fear of loss had made him cling, control, overthink every gesture. Now, he understood to love was not to grasp, but to stand beside someone freely, without chains. Science supported this too. Studies on attachment showed that secure bonds grew not from control, but from trust and openness. For the first time, Elias imagined a love that didn't exhaust him, but nourished him. Chapter 19. A quiet revolution inside. Months passed. Elias still had bad days. Thoughts still raced, memories still surfaced, uncertainty still stirred anxiety. But something fundamental had shifted. He no longer believed his thoughts were truth. He had discovered the gap between stimulus and response, the small pause where freedom lived. This was the quiet revolution inside him, not the end of thought, but a new relationship to thought. He could watch it without being swallowed. He could act without needing certainty. The science was clear. Neuroplasticity had reshaped his brain. The grooves of worry were still there, but new grooves of presence and acceptance had grown strong. He was no longer at war with his mind. He was walking beside it. Chapter 20. The Wide Sky. One morning, Elias climbed a hill outside the city. From the top, he saw the skyline stretch into the horizon, endless and vast. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Thoughts came as they always would, but they were small now, passing like birds across a wide sky. The sky itself was untouched. He remembered the vow he had made months ago in the darkness of his room to learn the science of letting go. He had learned, but not in the way he expected. The science had given him understanding, the practice had given him freedom. He smiled, whispering into the wind, "I don't need to control everything. I just need to live." The city below hummed with life, uncertain and unpredictable. For the first time, Elias felt ready to meet it, not with fear, not with overthinking, but with open hands. The journey was not over, but he no longer needed it to be. The sky was wide and he was free.